Welcome to this latest episode of the Duncan Cartlidge Online Podcast, the online resource for all construction professionals. Duncan Cartlidge Online offers more than 9 hours of video presentations available 24/7 for just £7 a month. Remember to subscribe through your usual podcast provider so you don't miss out on any updates, and be sure you visit our YouTube channel for additional content. It's great to have you with us again for another episode. As always, I'm joined by Barney, my red Labrador, who helps keep an eye on things and occasionally offers some invaluable advice. Both Barney and I would be delighted if you could take a moment to write a review. Your feedback really does mean a lot to us. If this is the first time listening to a Duncan Cartlidge Online podcast, welcome. Please remember to subscribe and catch up with previous episodes. To our existing subscribers, thank you very much for your continued support. Please help us spread the word about the podcast. In this final retrospective episode for 2025, that's bulging as much as Santa's sack, we'll take a look at It's All Down to Bob the Builder, but his knees are cracking, Mothman finally flutters away, ethical Christmases, and ready mixed concrete drones. Take cover. If I had to sum up the last 12 months in a few words, they would be, what a mess. A constant theme running through the 2025 podcasts and blogs has been the skill shortages. For the past 12 months or more, we have been raising concerns about the construction industry's dysfunctional labour model. A new report by the Centre for Social Justice in December 2025 concluded that the construction workforce is in near-terminal decline and relying on an army of Bob the Builder pensioners to deliver the target of 1.5 million new homes by 2029. And what's more, many of the Bob the Builders are heading for retirement. The report found that the number of construction workers aged 65 or over has nearly tripled from 49,000 to 130,000 since 2008, and now accounts for 1 in 20 of all employees in the industry. Personally, I find the prospect of working on site when over 66, soon to rise to 67, horrendous, particularly throughout the winter months. Dozens of new build projects in London have been abandoned in an echo of the financial crisis. Construction sites across the capital are being boarded up. According to a report by Molitor Consultancy, work has stopped on 1 in 6 housing construction projects, including developments with more than 20 private homes. There are now some 250,000 fewer builders than there were before the COVID-19 pandemic and Brexit, with many likely to quit the industry because of age. Construction is relying on a diminishing number of younger workers without sufficient skills or training programs to replenish the industry. In a blog this year in April, I expressed concern that the quality of the work is now so poor on new build housing that there is a growing, in inverted commas, profession of snagging inspectors. There is even a National Association of Professional Snagging Inspectors. Inspectors charge homeowners around £350 to £800, depending on the size of the property, to prepare a snagging list in the hope that they can have their dream home made good. I put my postcode into a Find a Snagging Inspector database and was presented with 14 names. At the other end of the problem, compared with 2008, there are 40% fewer 16 to 24-year-olds working in construction, and this represents a fall of more than 150,000. And as we move into 2026, with increases in the national insurance and the living wage, it will make it even more expensive for employers to take on staff. The lockdown years have so much to answer for. Since the pandemic, the attitude and aspiration of Gen Z has changed forever, and there seems to be no way to tempt them to quit their laptops and ergonomically designed gaming chairs to work on a cold, wet building site in the numbers that we need. See some of the comments made later by 16 to 24-year-olds about the conditions that they expect on site. This week, the government announced a multi-million-pound scheme to give unemployed young people a 6 weeks work experience in construction. But come on. And it's not just site-based work that's a problem. The RICS warned in November that a shortage of quantity surveyors was having an impact on project starts. But the main problem with QSs seems to be poor salaries. The average salary for a qualified quantity surveyor is £55,000, rising to an average of £70,000 for associate quantity surveyors and managers. And the icing on the cake was the release of figures showing that construction has maintained its longest period of continuous decline since the global financial crisis of 2008, with output falling for the 11th month in a row. Whatever happens to build, baby, build? And now moving on. It's been a few months now since I've mentioned my favourite superhero, Mothman, aka Justin Sullivan, the sometimes RICS president who had to step aside in April after his expert witness appearance following an infestation of mirths in a London mansion. In an attempt to downplay the issue, that is, the RICS president ignoring the institution's own mandatory advice when acting as an expert witness, the RICS decided to appoint a temporary president while the, in their words, very complex issue of the myths was investigated. At the time, I suggested that the RICS would just fudge the issue until the Mothman's term of presidency came to an end, and he could slip out the back door, and that is exactly what is going to happen. The members would probably never be told the outcome of the inquiry into the very complex matter, if there ever was one. What a way to run a professional body. Another long-running theme this year has been the promise of AI to solve the industry's outdated working practices. It appears that the industry has a very short memory, as the dash to AI is very reminiscent of the e-commerce bubble at the start of the millennium. In several episodes, we warned against regarding AI as a silver bullet. Nevertheless, according to Building, 84% of the top 150 consultants intend to spend money on AI in the future, with digital optimism being at an all-time high. I actually saw a post on LinkedIn this week posing the question over an image of a very large drone-type ready-mix concrete machine pouring concrete from a great height into formwork. Is this the future for placing concrete? The post asked. Alarmingly, some people thought it was. Imagine that little lot getting out of control. It could start World War III. And now moving on to ethical Christmases. Ethics in the construction industry has always been a delicate subject, and no more than at Christmas. The level at which hospitality changes from being a token gesture to being a request for a favour, wink wink, nod nod, say no more, you know what I mean, has always been a grey area. I guess I'm fortunate that during my career, the times that I have come face to face with unethical practice are few and far between. Nevertheless, I have experienced a number of strange Yuletide rituals, including the following. A practice where the senior partner, who by this time was worse for wear, gave the after Christmas lunch speech, which usually included the memorable line, "Do you know, after 25 years, my wife still thinks quantity surveying is all about taking off and working up." Pause for laughter. How times have changed. Try getting away or even wanting to get away with that these days. Back in the 1970s, I worked for one of the largest QS private practices in central London, and one of the perks of the job was luncheon vouchers for 15p a day, tax-free. Luncheon vouchers were paper vouchers that you could set against the cost of your lunch or other food. On the last day before the office shut for Christmas, and in some years that was Christmas Eve, the practice held a drinks party in the working up department for the staff, for which you were asked to contribute as you entered, yes, you've guessed it, a 15p luncheon voucher. And yes, alcohol was consumed, as I believe some office parties are now alcohol-free. What's the point? In the early 1970s, most offices closed for Christmas, although you had to be back on the 27th unless you'd booked holidays, at a time when 3 weeks annual leave was the norm. Christmas shutdowns didn't arrive until the late 1970s, early 1980s. In another practice, the senior partner called all the staff into his office just prior to Christmas on an individual basis and handed them an envelope containing turkey money, for which you had to show grovelling appreciation. Again, in the summer, prior to your 2-week summer holiday, the same process, but yes, with, you've guessed it, ice cream money. The first practice I ever worked for after leaving college, again in the 1970s, gave everyone, irrespective of whether they needed it or not, a very large, fresh, free-range turkey. As I was single at the time and didn't have a fridge, I handed mine over to the Salvation Army several days after I'd received it, just before it started to walk out of the door. When I first started work in the 1970s, the industry was rocked by the Paulson T. Dan Smith bribery scandal. After their conviction for offering bribes for public sector housing contracts on an industrial scale, I remember local authority staff refusing to accept simple items such as calendars or even pens from suppliers. Even so, just as the pair were starting their jail sentences, I recall a contractor taking me for a very long lunch in the revolving restaurant at the top of the post office tower, operated by Billy Butlin of Holiday Camp fame, before loading me with bottles of whiskey and cognac and sending me on my way. Happy days. T. Dan Smith later commented that his prison cell was better than some of the houses he had built. One of the many topics covered in the podcast during the last 12 months is mental health in construction. Without doubt, lockdown also played a part in the increase in mental health issues. Construction workers are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than the national average, making it one of the deadliest sectors for mental health problems in the UK. During the early part of my career, the traditional macho culture in the construction industry took no prisoners. If you were feeling under pressure, I was told in no uncertain terms to man up and get on with it. The CIOB has been a leader in highlighting the situation and published a report on the 12th of May 2025 based on a survey of people working in construction and in an attempt to determine what progress, if any, had been made since their first report in 2020, and also how widespread poor mental health is in the industry. The report goes on to analyse what steps are organisations from small medium size to large contractors taking to help their employers manage their mental health. Generally, for most stress-inducing factors, it was noticeable in the CIB research that it was the 18 to 25-year-old group for whom the stress levels were highest, whereas for the older age groups, stressful situations appeared to be more tolerated. Now, in no way do I wish to underplay the distress caused by mental illness, but in addition to the, let's call them, headline contributing factors to stress and anxiety, namely, sites are cold, wet, dirty, and there is pressure to finish on time, the report investigated the impact of other workplace-related issues. that I must confess I have never regarded as stressful, and emphasises just how difficult it is to make construction sexy for Gen Z. For example, lack of privacy on site. That's to say, no access to dedicated break rooms, something that in my experience I have never come across. Inadequate toileting facilities, with toilets being located too far away from where people are working or kept locked by the site manager. How many times have you come across a bottle of what looks like iron brew? To be avoided, like yellow snow. Then there's inadequate temperature control. Now, I'm not trying to be cynical here, but when working on site, weather and temperature is not something that can be easily controlled. Nevertheless, the CIOB found 42% of respondents found inadequate temperature control stressful, and there was a call for better heating and cooling systems to reduce the impacts of global warming, both for those working on site and in office-based roles. Perhaps one possible solution to reduce stress, if you think back to the pandemic years, is to work some or all of the week from home. Although I must admit I'm unsure just how compatible hybrid working is for site-based workers. A survey amongst recruitment organisations found that 3/4 of candidates are now turning down new roles that don't offer hybrid working, while 72% said companies that do not offer hybrid working are becoming less competitive in the job market. One thing is for certain, the suicide level amongst construction workers is unacceptable, and more must be done to counter the traditional macho mindset. So, I'll finish as I started. What a mess. That's all for this episode. I hope you found it both interesting and informative. Thank you for listening right through to the end. Barney and I think your stamina is worthy of a major prize. Unfortunately, we don't have one. This has been another episode from Duncan Cartlidge Online. We would really appreciate it if you could help us out by spreading the word, subscribing, and if you have time, write a review. Until next time, have a very happy Christmas or festive season. Thank you for your continued support. See you in the new year, and take care.